All right, welcome all. I'd like to call the Board of Selectmen meeting open for Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. Before we get going, I'd like to just pass the microphone to Miss Anne Marie Stronach just to make an announcement, because we lost an individual which she was close to in a couple of weeks ago. Ms. Stronach.
Thank you. I know that we haven't opened the meeting and said the Pledge of Allegiance, but what we really want to recognize today is the gratitude that we have for Mr. Steve Dekoff. Steve, who passed away way too young, served the town for almost 20 years on the local partnership housing board, as well as the conservation. He was certainly committed to ensuring sustainability practices, not only for our residents through housing, but through our environment through the conservation. And I just want to recognize his family for sharing him with us and thank him and send our condolences to his family.
Thank you very much. All right, with that being said, would you please stand with me and salute the flag? I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, let's jump right into schedule items at 7 o'clock. Schedule item number 1 is a tax rate hearing. This is a public hearing, so would I have a motion to waive the public notice reading?
So moved.
Second.
A motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Okay. Ms. Foley, want to just introduce yourself, and we'll jump right in.
Sure. I'm Joanne Foley, the Chief Assessor for the Town of Tewksbury.
Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for hosting the tax classification hearing tonight. While it's just me sitting here in front of you, I want to acknowledge that this presentation is really a representation of a collaborative group effort with the whole finance group. So my thanks to Richard, the Treasurer Collectors Group, the Auditors Group, and especially all the members of the assessing staff. So we'll jump right in to the first slide we have for you tonight, the purpose of the hearing. There are 4 points for us to look at. The first would be allocating the local property tax levy among the 5 property classes for the fiscal year 2020 and the selection of a minimum residential factor. Then we need to consider whether to allow a residential exemption, whether to allow a small commercial exemption, and whether to allow a discount of up to 25% for property classified as open space. Looking at the residential exemption, a residential exemption shifts the tax burden from lower value properties to higher value properties and to those owned by non-residents. This exemption is typically seen in communities that can be classified as large cities, communities with an abundance of apartments, and resort communities. In fiscal year 2019, there were 16 communities that used a residential exemption, including Boston, Brookline, Everett, Malden, Nantucket, Somerville, and Waltham. Historically, this board has voted no. Looking at the small business exemption, a small business exemption lowers the taxes on parcels occupied by small businesses and shifts those taxes to other commercial and industrial taxpayers. In fiscal 2019, 15 communities used this exemption, including Braintree, Seekonk, Swampscott, and Rentham. Historically, the board has voted no on this exemption. An open space discount. An open space discount would allow a discount of up to 25% for property classified as open space. This discount shifts the tax burden to the residential class. There currently is no land classified as open space in Tewksbury. Historically, the board has not granted a discount for property classified as open space. So what is the tax shift? Shifting the tax rate moves the tax burden to be raised between the residential and open space classes and the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. When it comes to classes, we have 5 different ones that the property is classified into: residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. The setting of the tax rate actually starts in January. We start looking at identifying all arm's length sales. We look at all calendar sales from the year 2018 and determine whether these sales are arm's length sale. And the definition of an arm's length sale is a sale between a willing buyer and a willing seller with no unusual circumstances involved in the sale. So for our fiscal year 2020 values, we look at what sold in 2018. We had 379 single-family home sales, 147 condominium sales, 73 commercial and industrial sales. That includes commercial industrial condominiums. We start with sending out sales questionnaire to every single transaction that comes in. We then have conversations with realtors, brokers, and developers. We make a physical visit to every single one of those sales. We do an MLS review of each property, and we also do an aerial review of the property. Once we determine the arm's length sales, we then move on to the valuation. We take that analysis and we analyze the market data. We make the market data adjustments to the properties. We then take our sales data and send it to the Department of Revenue for review. And then we send them all property valuations, and they review the valuations and the counts. Then all property adjustments, including our new growth, are reviewed by the Department of Revenue. This current slide takes a look at where we stood in fiscal year 2019, where the board voted to shift the taxes at a 1.55 shift. If you take a look, the FY19 average single-family home was $404,963. They paid an average tax bill of $6,415, which was a 7.9% value change, a 5.9% tax change, and a tax change of approximately $361. For the average residential condo, which was valued at $307,125, they paid taxes of $4,865, which was a 7.9% value change, a 5.9% tax change, and $272 change. Then looking at the average commercial property for FY19, it was valued at $773,191. They paid $21,363, which was a 1.9% change for the value, a 1.5% change for the tax, and about $321. Sometimes everyone likes to do a comparison of where we sit and who we are amongst our neighbors. At this time of the year, there are very few communities that have their FY20 values set. So we took our FY20 value at the average with the 1.55 shift and plugged it in with all of the surrounding towns around us with their 2019 taxes. So you can see with the 2020, if the shift was to remain the same, where Tewksbury sits in and amongst its neighbors, which is pretty much middle of the pack. So on to the real meat of the presentation. This is the top chart shows you the FY20 tax rate split options with the levy of 94, 460, 425. So if the town of Tewksbury had no shift at all and we had a single tax rate, that tax rate would be $17.95 for both residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property taxes. The average single-family tax bill would be $7,779. The average residential condo would be $6,092, and the average commercial would be $15,055. The 1.55 shift, which is what the town manager is recommending to remain, would change that tax rate to $16 for the residential class, $27.82 for the commercial industrial, which would give the average tax bill of a single-family home $6,934. The residential condominium would be $5,430, and the commercial average tax bill would be $23,332. If the board were to look to shift it to a 1.56 shift, that would change the residential tax rate to $15.97, the commercial industrial to $28. The single-family tax bill would be $6,921, residential condo would be $5,420, and the average commercial would be $23,483. And you can see the numbers increasing to the 1.57, 1.58, and the 1.75, which would be the max that the board would be allowed to shift. That would give you a residential tax rate of $15.29 and a commercial industrial of $31.40. It would bring your single-family average tax bill to $6,626, your condominium to $5,189, and your commercial bill to $26,335. The bottom part of the chart shows you the relationship between the fiscal year 19 taxes in value with the fiscal year 20 with the 1.55 shift that's recommended. So if you look at that, the average single-family home, which was $404,963, is for fiscal year 20 is $433,362. Their FY20 taxes at the 1.55 shift would be $6,934, which would be a 7% value change, an 8.1 tax change, and a difference of $519. The average residential condominium, which changed from $307,125 to an average amount of $339,399. FY20's tax bill at the 1.55 shift would be $5,430, which would be a 10.5% value change, an 11.6 tax change, and a dollar amount of $565. The average commercial, which was $773,191, jumps to $838,694. Their FY20 taxes would be $23,332, which is an 8.5% value change, a 9.2% tax change, and a $1,970 tax bill change. So the next slide just shows you the comparison of total valuation for the town for fiscal years 17, 18, 19, and then the proposed 2020. The proposed 2020 values that you see are the 1.55 proposed shift. So it's clearer to see that in the next few slides, so we'll just roll forward a little bit. This next slide shows you the comparison of values and taxes paid. It walks you through pretty much what we did the previous slides, but shows you the increases and the decreases in the percentages. So for fiscal year 19, again, it shows you that it went from $404,963 up to $433,362, which is shows you the charts we were just looking at. And then the bottom part of that slide shows you the average tax bills for the average single-family home, the increases based on the 1.55 shift. So just looking at it from a percentage point of view, the tax burden, this chart, the first chart shows you the 2019 shift. So if we had no shift at all, in 2019, the residential took up 83.14% of the pie, and the commercial industrial 16.86. At the selected 1.55 shift in 2019, that shifted the balance to 73.87 for residential and commercial industrial to 26.13. So if we then look at the 2020 shift with the 1.55, first looking on the right-hand side, which shows the percentages with no shift, the residential is 83.54, with the commercial industrial personal property at 16.46. If you look to do the 1.55 shift, which shifts the burden onto some of the burden onto the commercial industrial, that changes their piece of the pie to 74.48%, and so that would be the residential, and then the commercial to 25.52. And then this is just a chart of our levy. The levy is made up of the previous year's levy plus 2.5%, plus new growth, plus debt exclusions. So you can see from 2019 to 2020, we jumped to the 94.5 almost with all those things added in, especially with the debt exclusion. And then based on the numbers, using the recap and all the information we have, our excess tech levy capacity for fiscal year 2020 would be $39,373. So that brings us to the required action by the board tonight. First would be allocating the local property tax levy among the 5 property classes for the fiscal year 2020 and the selection of a minimum residential factor. The town manager is recommending an MRF of 0.8916, which is the 1.55 shift. Whether to allow a residential exemption, town manager recommends no for this. Whether to allow a small commercial exemption, town manager recommends no. And whether to allow a discount of up to 25% for property classified as open space, town manager recommends no. And that is the conclusion of the data.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well done. So at this time, what I'd like to do is, since it's a public hearing, what I'd like to do is open up to the public, and then what we can do is turn it back to the board and have a dialogue with Ms. Foley. That sound reasonable? That being said, would there anyone in the public that would like to make any comments at this time? Seeing none. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open up to the board for questions for Ms. Foley. Again, well job presenting, and I know how much time, energy, and effort this took from a lot of folks, so I thank you for that.
Thank you.
How about Mr. Kratman?
Thank you so much for putting the presentation together. It's always put together well, and especially when we're seeing the surrounding communities. Now, the town manager recommending a 1.55. The surrounding communities, are they around the same amount of what they're recommending for their tax shift?
For this coming fiscal year, I would say most communities have not yet had their classification hearings yet, so we don't really know what they're recommending, but that, the sheet that we showed pretty much
Yeah.
shows where taxes are, but I don't know of any actually that have had their classification hearings yet.
And as far as the shifts are concerned for those communities around us, some are much higher, others are much less,
I'm guessing
kind of in the middle.
The commercial, if some town has more commercial or more businesses, I'm sure most of them do around us, something like Burlington or something like that, where they have a big outgrowth of commercial businesses, I'm sure the shift is probably much different there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. No, that's all I had. It's just, that was very insightful to show the other communities around us. I know we have a lot of people that believe that our taxes are much higher than everybody else's, but yet when we have this each year, we're either in the middle or toward the back of some of the surrounding communities of what we're doing. So it's happy to see that up there. So thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, before
Please.
there's more questions, I should have talked before Mr. Kratman asked his questions, but the reasoning for the recommendation at 1.55, from my standpoint, was pretty straightforward. We looked at the data for the values throughout the community for commercial, industrial, and residential, and the feeling was that this particular year, it was not fair to shift any further than we have already to the businesses because of the $519 average tax bill increase for a residential home. Approximately $355 of it is because of the new school. and that was a debt exclusion voted by the residents this past April. To shift any more and increase the businesses any further than they will be increased because of the new school, I felt was unfair because the new school truly is a benefit to the residents. Although there could be an argument that a good school system attracts economic development, but we already have a large shift that the businesses pay for. But I just felt it was fair that we did not shift any more of the burden to the businesses and increase their taxes any further than needed to be because of the school. Also, my feeling was that any further shift was such a large impact to especially the higher valued properties in town that, again, the message would be that, we want to maintain the businesses we have. We want to encourage more business to come to the community. We want to encourage businesses to expand. We've seen that over the last couple of years. And by keeping the shift where it is, it's just an indication to them that the town is being fair about their process when it comes to taxes to the businesses. And that's simply what it was in the recommendation. But a lot of it was driven because of the debt exclusion having the largest impact to the tax increase. Without that debt exclusion, the average home would have seen an increase of around $164, which would have been a reasonable increase for FY20.
Along those same lines, as far as the debt exclusion, you mentioned $355 for the new elementary school. But what's the other breakdown? Really, the big chunk is, I call it the big three, the new elementary school, the sewer, and the new fire station, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
I mean, so if you do the math, I don't need the numbers, but the bottom line to your point is it's really an increase of $164 for 2.5 and plus new growth minus debt exclusion. And those are the big three, correct?
correct.
Okay. You can get the
And
numbers.
the 164 would have included those other debt exclusions in it. The 355 is solely for the school.
Okay.
And the impact of the school based on the average home. And I mean, the good news is that when we originally proposed the elementary school, we thought the increase was going to be around 445. So because of the good interest rate we got in our bonds, we were able to bring that in much lower. So that was good news about that.
Very good. Anything else? I should have kicked it to you, Mr. Monterey. Anything else? I'm sure.
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Kratman?
Oh, I'm done, thank you.
Okay, very good. Ms. Wellman?
Sure. So thank you for those comments, and Joanne, great presentation. Please extend my thanks to your staff. I know it's a lot of work. I know you guys have been doing it a while. As you said, you begin every year, and I know you did a evaluation. This is the evaluation year, is that correct?
Yes, revalue this year, yep.
Right. And so the CIP shift and the tax rate are driven by valuations.
Correct.
And so you explained a little bit about your process, looking at sales and so forth. How do you value commercial properties?
A couple different ways. So mostly they're valued by income and expense approach to value. We also do use the sales and things like that, but income and expense obviously is based on what they can rent their properties for, which we did see this year. In past years, our commercial was pretty flat. We did see a little increase to their values this year, which also increases their tax bills. I would say we're finally seeing in some of our bigger properties some amenities being put into the properties, which is bringing in some new tenants. Which is a good sign, and long-term will be good for valuation.
An
for those
expansion of
properties.
some tenants?
Say that again?
An expansion of some tenants to other buildings, like Raytheon, for
Well,
instance?
right, yeah. And I think in a smaller commercial, we in our opinion, we tend to see our smaller businesses moving locations, but not necessarily a big addition.
So a question I had, and I know it's the tradition of this board over time not to do a small business exemption, and so I looked into that a little bit about what that requirement is, and it's 10 employees or fewer, and it has to have adjacent businesses on the same property that fit also the same qualifications for everybody in that space
Correct.
to kind of work. And so I'm wondering, is it, because we have a number of plaza sort of retail establishments where you have kind of some of your smaller mom and pop, small businesses that are renting there, is that something that maybe we should consider doing a study on in the future, not for tonight, but down the road, to see if there's any sort of benefit that we would get by saying, because we're thinking, okay, we've got Raytheon and we have Home Depot and Walmart and sort of these large industrial organizations that understand that taxes are sort of the price of doing business. But that's the rationale that's used in some other communities for doing that maximum shift. And I don't think that we would do that here, and I don't support that, in part because of the impact on our smaller businesses. But is it something in the future that we should consider? Does a small business exemption make sense for these really small organizations?
So I don't think analyzing anything is ever a bad idea, so certainly it's something to consider and look at. We do get a list that's provided that we do look at to see who are the properties with under the 10.
Yeah.
They also, the building, the property also has to be under $1 million
Right.
in value in order for them to receive it. So it's certainly something you can look at that gives you relief to sometimes some of your properties, but it's very specific criteria,
Yes,
so
it is.
it
Yep.
requires a lot of in-depth analysis for it, but certainly it's something we could entertain.
Well, yeah, I wonder
to
if
look
that's
at.
something that you would, as staff, I don't want to burden staff with additional things. I also don't necessarily want to appoint another committee and say, let's let them look into it, but maybe that's something. Shaking head. But I just think, I think that there's some interesting there because we do hear a lot, and I hear a lot about taxes in town, and that we're building a lot. We've never done an operational override in Tewksbury. Nobody supports that. And it hasn't been brought up in a number of years, but our debt exclusions are driving these higher increases, and people are really feeling it, particularly in the elderly and young families, that kind of thing. So
Setting a tax rate and everything is a really delicate balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of moving pieces. I would say a lot of the communities that do use the residential the small commercial exemption
Sure.
have those big commercial entities to lean on,
Mhm.
right? So it sort of makes sense. So there's that balance of taking away from the smaller and adding to the bigger,
Mhm.
and shifting to the bigger and all that. So you can call it a price to do business, but when you're at a point in a community where you're trying to attract big business and
Agreed.
keep that growing, you have to be careful how much you shift
What that
on.
burden looks
Right,
like, yeah.
how much of that burden you continue to push.
Absolutely.
You know.
Well, because what we don't want to create is a disincentive or a lag in our new growth.
Correct.
And I appreciate that, and I've seen that happen in some of our neighboring communities, like with Analog Devices, is this empty building on Lowell Road, whatever it is, in Wilmington. It's complete. They went to Norwood, which has a $22 tax rate, versus Wilmington, that's over 30 for their commercial. So I think, a balance is important. And I appreciate the town manager's assessment of fairness, and I understand that view. For me, the notion of fairness I find somewhat subjective. A new elementary school is a cost that's for the direct benefit of families in town. And by that same logic, seniors shouldn't pay that bill, or single families with no children should pay it, single individuals. But I don't think we can really apply that logic across the tax classifications. I think that good schools attract a very good labor pool that's useful to have for industries that we want to attract in Tewksbury. And I think residents have likewise invested in our commercial and industrial properties through our sewer program, for instance, which I have septic, but I pay taxes on the sewer debt. And there are lots of other people and other ways that we do that. These are just some examples. So I think that it's important that Tewksbury, rather than from a fairness perspective, I think that the shift should be viewed more as a competitive, using a competitive view. And I'm interested in staying competitive with our neighbors, so that companies that are interested in being in this area are incentivized to be here because our tax rate is more competitive than some of our neighbors. And our shift tends to be pretty close to Andover, but our valuations tend to be lower, so we're still incentivized. We're much lower than Wilmington is. Billerica has a full tax shift as well. So I think, and with the amenities that we offer in this community, that's why we're seeing new growth, partly because, building, in town is possible. We've seen some large new investment in the community. But I think staying conservative is important. So under that, I also agree that we have to prioritize our residents. They are the final arbiters of our budget through town meeting, and they are screaming, sometimes literally, for tax relief in the community. So I would support maybe a greater shift. Even if it's de minimis, I think it's important as a stepping stone as we go forward in future years. So, a 1.56 is something that I'm interested in having a further conversation about, somewhere in the 1.56 to 1.57 range. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. How about Mr. Brian Dick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one quick question, and then I have a couple comments on the town manager's recommendation. So this is fully, I was just curious, was there any, I don't know if this is nitpicking or whatever, but is there any zero valuation increases on like a commercial property or a residential property from FY19 to FY20? Can that happen? And if it does happen, is it because it was overvalued last year?
So
how's
it
that
can
work?
happen, and it can happen a couple of ways. It can happen that if a particular, let's just say you had strip malls that were different from your big office buildings, and we didn't see that there was much change in their thing. They could stay steady for a year if that were possible. In a residential home, more unlikely. But if by chance your valuations went up, but that person removed an in-ground pool and removed a finished basement, and we took those things out, then yes, there's a chance that they could not have any increase in valuation.
Okay.
Very unlikely, but
Very unlikely, not a lot of that,
not a
but
lot of that in either category.
either category, of residential, commercial. Okay. I'll try to be brief, so I appreciate the presentation. Thank you for your efforts. Really very thorough. The town manager, once again, has provided us with information, very clear, precise information on the tax shift and how it affects residential versus commercial. Taxes, not an easy discussion, but we got to talk about it. If we had a solution of zero taxes for all, we would implement it, but that's not the case. So that being said, residents, which includes me, requested better services, projects. Residents and businesses have enjoyed many different infrastructure improvements like new schools, as well as the sewer and the new fire. However, as Mr. Montori mentioned, big elephant in the room on this tax increase this year is how the residents voted, and that was the new elementary school. That's the big piece, right? Elephant in the room. So my reasons, I agree with the town manager's recommendation on a fair approach this year. Due to that fact, so 1.55, I would agree to recommend that. I don't agree moving it up or down. And the reasons for that is currently, as it stands today, with the shift to 1.55, commercial businesses already pay 9% more of the tax levy than the residents. So I think the fairest option for both would be to keep it to encourage businesses to stay in Tewksbury and not to push them away. Increasing it can push them away, creating higher taxes for them. So you want to promote economic development, not discourage it. As presented, the tax shift 1.55 would impact every business. So from a business standpoint, but I think you really need to dig into some of the numbers of the biggest companies and how that would affect them if we shifted it up to 1.56, 1.57, and so on. Just moving it 100th higher, larger businesses will see tens of thousands of dollars of increase that I think displays not good partnership on our behalf from a town. So some of those examples, like Home Depot, paid $274,300 in FY19. In 2020, we're asking them on a 1.55 shift to pay $298,447. So that's $24,000 that a Home Depot is going to pay in taxes to Tewksbury right now without shifting it. That's an 8.8% increase from last year, FY19 to FY20. If you look at Market Basket headquarters, we're asking them to pay $23,000 more this year, 4% increase. A place like Tewksbury Country Club, 3.3%. A generic gas station or a restaurant, 6%, 3% increase from FY19 to FY20. A small pizza shop, right now, if you look at some of the numbers, we're asking them to pay $14,000 for selling pizzas in Tewksbury for that business. So as a resident, what I pay, that's much, much more. Granted, it's different, but it's a lot more. So asking business to pay more, absorbing the increase of property valuations as well as the debt exemption, I think is difficult to swallow for any business, especially the small ones. So we're trying to promote town economics, we're trying to bring in economic development, higher taxes will deter businesses from coming in, as well as we could end up pushing some of the larger businesses, smaller businesses to our neighbors. And we don't want to lose that tax revenue because, as the town manager mentioned in some of our literature, if we lose that tax revenue, the other taxpayers absorb that for years to come. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So we need to consider that and be conscious of that increase. Just finishing up, Mr. Montori mentioned about the elephant in the room, a good elephant, because I supported the school. As a resident and as a business owner in Tewksbury, residential values are up $28,000 on average in FY20. That's with a 1.55 tax shift. The increase for an average family is $519. $355 is for that new elementary school. The residents voted for it, not the businesses. We have to take that into consideration. They're still paying a piece of that pie, but asking them to pay more than that, we got to take that into consideration on what that can do to our economic development. I understand Mrs. Miller's point about seniors, no kids, but I believe good schools promote good valuations of homes, and those seniors get to sell that home at a bigger price because it's a new school, whether they have kids in the school or not. But your point is taken, so I appreciate that. So just finishing up, one other note, when it comes from businesses in this town, and it can't go unnoticed, I think we've all been affected by it, but I'd have to point to the businesses on Main Street in FY19. There's a big paving project going on. We're trying to make that beautiful. Those small businesses, and I've been contacted by a few, have had some hardships. So I would say sales aren't as robust as maybe some people might think. So we have to keep that in consideration, that they've had some hardships on Main Street, and those are those small businesses. So a fair solution that I support, I'm a resident and a business owner, I believe the recommendation by the town manager at 1.55 should remain. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I just...
Please.
I just want to go back to a question you had asked so we can give you the information. In regard to the debt exclusions of the FY20 average tax bill, which is projected to be $6,934. Of that amount, $282 of that bill is for sewer debt exclusion, $178 is for the high school debt exclusion, $355 is for the elementary school debt exclusion, $91 is for the fire, and then all remaining debt exclusions is $39 for a total of $949 of that average tax bill is for debt exclusions. And then just on the side, the CPA assessment is $74 of that amount. And then one other thing I just want to point out that I failed to mention, when you shift any further or shift at all to commercial commercial industrial properties, you're also shifting to personal property. So these small businesses or any of these businesses not only will pay a higher tax bill for their real estate, they're also going to pay that much more on their personal property, which is significant for some of these businesses. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Tori. All right, Ms. Stronach, you're up next.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think everybody who's been watching these tax hearings for many years knows that I am a proponent of our higher shift to our commercial property. However, I was coming in here, thinking about a 1-5-6 shift, and listening to my colleagues and all three of you who preceded me, and each of you gave me some food for thought, and I'd just like to kind of point that out to make sure that my thinking is correct before I make any decisions. So if we're looking at these 14 communities on the single-family home, the average single-family home, and you are showing us 14, and right now we are basically at number 6. These are based on their FY19, so we actually could move up instead of being in the middle of the pack to being a lower community once they do their taxes. And I think that that is really important for us as people making these decisions, because all of us talked about how difficult these decisions are and how delicate of a balance it is. And I think that this year, out of all of your presentations, I think that you've highlighted that the most to us, and I appreciate that. So I just want to recognize to the residents at home that while we may be somewhat dead in the middle right now, chances are when the other communities do theirs, that we will be on the brighter side of that equation from a residential standpoint. So that's number one. I want to check my hearing on Jane's comment. You said Wilmington was over $30
Correct.
for commercial, and that they just lost a significant company to Norwood, which was at
22. So
22.
Wilmington is $30.94 for their CIP and $13.75 for their residential.
And our rate would be about 28. Did I do that math right?
If it were.
If we did-
The recommended one?
Yep.
27.
2782, so,
So, yeah, you're knocking around $28.
okay. So which is pretty,
Andover
is
is-
much closer to,
Right. That's their 2019 number, and then Andover's 2019 number is 2751,
okay.
and their shift is 1571.
Okay. So, that is important to me, but more importantly, and I think what I really kind of looked at is, I always look at the town manager's recommendations and hold them in high esteem, because he has spent a lot more time probably analyzing this than I have, and I'm sure with the help of your team that you didn't willy-nilly put this together. But the comments that were made by my colleague, Mr. Dick, really kind of hit home with that 8% of the shift, and that is a very high number. And I realize that our communities and our residents, and me included, as a resident, even though we're at 5, 8 is pretty high, and their property values could be a lot more than what mine is. And I was going to mention the personal property tax, because you always wait till the end to throw that out. You kind of threw me a curveball tonight. But most importantly, the Route 38, and most of our smaller businesses are food establishments. That's anecdotal. I don't know if that's true, but I think a lot of our smaller businesses are food establishments, and they are located on 38. And I know that they've asked us for tax abatements. They've been very creative in we have to fix the road. We get yelled at when we don't fix it. We get yelled at when we do fix it. We have to fix it. But the other thing that is concerning me this year is, other infrastructure requirements that some of them that had to do last year or have to do in terms of some, I don't want to call them unfunded mandates to them, but basically that's what they are, because that's their business. But that is also having a significant impact on many of our small business owners. And I've been hearing from those people too, saying, this is a burden to me. And so I was looking at 1.56, 1.57, but I think that I am being persuaded to leave it at the 1.55 with the 1.8 tax shift, given the delicate balance of the two. So that's where I'm leaning right this second. And I'm also looking over the past several years where we basically increased it 2%, by 2 points pretty evenly across the board. And just as we've given residents some tax relief and trying to move out that sewer debt and, that 740, and I mean, we're grasping that $10 here, $10 there, and 1.56 is only going to get us $10. And I don't think at the end of the day, given the economic development of the balance, that may be worth it to us. So that's where I'm sitting right this second.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Stronach. All right, I will try to be brief. And thank you very much for the presentation, and just for the residents, we've had this information for a little bit. We've done a ton of homework. Mr. Montori is sick and tired of us calling him and having meetings, but here we are. So I always say it always starts at town meeting, whether it's town meeting or special town meeting, where the selectmen don't necessarily raise the taxes. That's our form of government. We vote, to either for overrides, debt exclusion, or otherwise. But now, as selectmen and women, it's our roles and responsibilities to do this delicate balance called classification hearings. So it's never easy. So I just had a couple questions. As far as the single home parcels, I think we have it at 7,838, let's just say north of 7,000. And I think there was 379 transactions. So again, single family parcels, 7,838. Any idea, Ms. Folio, Mr. Montori, how many parcels we have for commercial industrial in town?
A little under 500 for commercial, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, I can look that up.
Okay.
I don't have the thing with me.
Okay,
I don't have the LA form with me.
okay, that's fair. I just wanted to get a balance because it was, I used to be good at math until the internet. Now I do everything on the internet. But anyway, so I just want to kind of give the residents, you almost have 8,000 single parcels versus 500 commercial. Very significant. And I do believe, I always say democracy equals multiple viewpoints. So I respect everyone's comments on the board as far as what angle they may look at this from. I kind of think, I'm going to think a little bit differently, where I think we have 83%, Mr. Montori, maybe I'll turn to you. I think we have 83% residential versus, now I can do this, I think this is easy math, 23% other. Is that about accurate, 83% residential?
Yeah, it is.
All right, that's a very big number for a lot of communities. So I'm going to go a step further. As far as the 83% residential, I think we have a very, very large number of senior folks in town. As a matter of fact, I think if we look at the Merrimack Valley, are, over 55, you can classify seniors, any, different ages. But I do believe that our senior base is very, very high in Tewksbury compared to all our communities. I had the numbers somewhere, I don't have them now. But Mr. Montori, would that be a fair assessment, or is that, I'm asking the question, I want to speak with facts, but I know.
When we do have a large senior population, I'm not sure how it compares to every other community, but I know we do have a large senior population, and it's growing.
So that's where my thought process is, where we have folks with fixed income, and we're talking about, and listen, the residents spoke in town meeting, special town meeting, for the debt exclusions, for the sewer, for the new fire station, and otherwise for the other ones that we called out. But I will say, on a fixed income, they don't go up, fixed incomes don't go up 4%, 5%, 6%, 8%. They don't. They're flatline. So I'm always going to start with the senior community. That's where I start first. Seniors first, and I work my way down. And if I think about the seniors first as a very large population of the residents, We don't raise the taxes, as I mentioned earlier, Selectmen. However, this is our opportunity as a select board to, this is where I want to be careful. We're not lowering taxes. We're essentially shifting it where we're lowering, I'm going to say, the burden on all residents with the tax shift. So and what I asked Mr. Montorio earlier is kind of a breakdown along the lines of Ms. Wellman. We said, how many businesses are there? Real big businesses, small businesses, because we have some real monsters, Home Depot, Thermo Fisher,
Right there.
Demoulas, as you mentioned, and the list goes on, versus, I'm going to call them, I know people don't like the word, like mom and pop shops. I don't mean that in any disrespectful way, but when you're comparing some of our businesses in town to a Home Depot, to a Demoulas, it's a pretty significant difference to what their property value is, to what their percentage is, versus, let's say, a pizza restaurant, if you would. Very, very big comparison. So what I tried to kind of do is look at the numbers. Mr. Montori, and I know a body of work recommended the 155. I started looking at the 156 and 157, again, shifting it more off the residents, off the seniors. And my values, again, very subjective, as Ms. Wellman alluded to. I think the 156, looking at the shift, and again, shifting from residents to the other SIP properties, I don't think it was, it wasn't a significant, again, very subjective. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, wow, we're really driving the businesses out of here. And I'll go a step further. I think the 157 got to the point where businesses, I think, wouldn't say like, holy mackerel. I think once you start talking about the 158 tax shift, really putting a burden on the commercial and industrial, I think that's a holy mackerel. Like, what the heck are you doing? I'm leaving tomorrow. Again, very subjective, my opinion. And, a lot of times through communities that shift to commercial and industrial, let's be honest. And this is debatable, Glenn, this is all debatable. Sometimes you can increase your pizzas, 30 cents a pizza, 25 cents a Coke, X amount for your businesses and pass it to the consumer. Let's just say it. I don't see how a resident, and I'm going to go back to the senior base, can increase their fixed income. So again, it's not a cop-out or an excuse to a business, but I'm just being brutally honest, if they do get a shift. So I said a lot here. I think I had one other question too. Oh, you answered it. So I would be in support of being slightly bold for the residents. Tewksbury going from a 155, the recommendation, up to a 157 tax shift. And again, having this board really make a bold shift for the residents to help with all the debt exclusion and the taxes coming up. And oh, by the way, in the very near future, we talked about stormwater. I don't want to lump it in this conversation and muddy the waters, but let's be honest. We're going to have a frank discussion in the next couple months about stormwater, and it's a fee. So that factors in for my thought process here. I know it's going to be spread across the board, but it's another fee on residents, and especially on the senior community with fixed income. So food for thought. That's my food for thought down the road. So I have said a lot. I think that's all I have. So with that being said, any further discussion from the board? I think we all said a lot of things, some differently. Any other discussion from the board?
Mr. Chair, I just had a
Please.
quick question of Mr. Montori. So the chairman's brought up the stormwater fee. Is that spread across residential and commercial?
Everyone will pay that. The residents will have a flat, fixed fee, and the businesses will pay probably a higher fee because of the amount of impervious cover on their business area for parking. Everyone will pay that.
Does that depend on their water usage, disbursement?
Nope, it's going to depend on how much impervious cover they have for parking area
Okay.
and roof, things like that.
So that could be well over $75 per
Yeah, I mean,
small business.
Oh, definitely. I think it's,
What would an average increase be, would you think, on a small pizza shop with a small parking lot? That put you on the spot?
No, I mean, it could be,
$1,000? Is it 500?
no, some of the larger ones will see that type, but they'll probably be maybe $150 because of the equivalent residential unit that we're coming up with is at most $75 we're looking at. Let's say a pizza shop is double that, say $150, maybe a little bit more.
I appreciate, I know I put you on the spot, but I just wanted to clarify that it's just not a resident fee. Businesses are going to share in that stormwater fee, and it's going to be greater than the resident fee.
Most likely.
Because they have more land and more impervious surface, it's progressive.
So thank
Yep.
you very much, Mr. Chair.
No, I'm with you, and when we mention there's a fee, we still have the opportunity of the board, to be quite honest with you, to vote, I don't want to tip my cards, but I'll tip my cards, I'm going to recommend a zero increase, and I'm going to try to look at water, returned earnings in water, and retained earnings in water, and retained earnings sewer, so we don't hit any of the businesses, and we don't hit any of the residents. Not to tip my hand, but I just did. Oops. But again, it's just a consideration where,
We'll be ready.
right, it's just a consideration where, it's one more fee, it's one more thing, it's one more thing, it's one more thing, it's one more thing, and again, for 83% of our folks that put us, I've said enough. So anyways. All right, any other, good discussion, this is what it's all about, we're supposed to come out with different angles and viewpoints. What else?
I have one thing. For just the residents that are listening, what we've done in the past, what was our shift in the last couple of years? So this way they know where we're coming from with this. I know we've been here to do it, but
Sure.
what did we go from the last couple of years?
So-
and what have we shifted?
I did a look back to 2010, and in 2010, the shift was 1.42. We kept it there for a couple of years, then we went to 149 in FY12. We actually dropped it back down in FY13 because of the value drops that commercial saw to 147. It stayed there a couple of years, then it went to 150 and 15, stayed there for 2 years. 2017 was 152, then we went to 153 in 18, and then last year 155, went up
So in
2.
the last 2 years, we've gone up a couple of percentages each year toward the businesses. So while I'm listening to, you can make a strong argument for any one of these.
Absolutely.
But I'm also looking to, as, my colleagues have spoken, I understand we want to take care of our residents, we want to take care of our seniors, we want to do all that as well. But the last couple of years, what message are we sending if we raised it 2% over every year for the last 2 years to businesses? And like I said, I think the businesses are doing well in this community, and I think it's a lot to do with the infrastructure that we're doing, with all the new residential building that we've had in the community and all the new residents that have moved in. You can walk up and down the street to almost any restaurant or business, and there are places that are doing very well. I know the infrastructure is probably hampering a lot of people during the day, but I still think that, deliveries and everything else are doing pretty well. I don't think the economy is doing pretty well. People are spending money. We got a lot of new people that have moved into the community that tend not to cook at home and go out and order food and do those type of things and have that kind of expendable income that have moved to our community. And so I see that happening in the community when I go out and about. I mean, this is a tough one because I understand where everybody's coming on this, and I agree almost with everything, but I also don't want to send the wrong message. That every year, if we keep doing this, and we go up 2%, 2%, 2%, the business is going to start saying, well, they're going to do this every single year to me. And there has to be a fine line to make sure that we draw, 2% really isn't that much, but if you do 2% every single year, it really starts adding up. So I think that's something that we'll have to really look at.
And just one point there, I mean, Mr. Kratman, we were all part of that last year. I think last year it just happened to work out with the values that went up, with the values up for commercial, industrial, and residential. The value change is 1.9 and the tax change is 1.5 on commercial. And that's pretty darn reasonable. That was pretty darn reasonable last year with a $321 increase. So it wasn't like, what's the saying? We stuck it to the average commercial. I thought it was, extremely reasonable, but point's taken. Ms. Stronach?
I'm sorry, I just have to say one thing. First of all, I don't think that any member of this board thinks that our seniors can afford any more than they're already paying. I agree with you 100%. And I think that as a board collectively, we have engaged in other ways to help our seniors. We've tasked our town manager and have had several meetings on ways to impact our seniors in terms of tax relief and, workforce tax credits and the like. And I know that Selectman Wellman has brought a wealth of information from her community that we're looking at too. So for me, in making this decision, I just don't think $10 to $26 is going to be enough of an impact when on a business that could be a minimum of 300. So that for me is kind of that balance. And our seniors that need relief, I think we're addressing in other ways. I do agree with you, but given that the school building project was at a much higher rate, I think that we're in a little bit, for me, I felt a little bit better when I looked at these numbers, and the school came in much lower than anticipated. So I think that that helps mitigate some of it because I anticipated it to be higher than it was. So I just want to say that I feel your passion around our seniors, and I think that we have other ways of addressing that as well. And I think that as collectively as a board and tasking the town manager to that will continue as we move on. So I just wanted to mention that.
Perfect. Ms. Wellman?
And to your point, I would agree. I think everybody here is cognizant of our seniors, and certainly nobody's, trying to disadvantage them. And I think this board is making efforts absolutely to work for our seniors. I did want to mention that this is a 10-year look back that Mr. Montori has given us, which is excellent, and it looks at our record. I do want to mention that in 2007 and in 2008, our CIP shift was 1.611 and 1.604, and it's come down over the years, and it is moving back up, but we're not approaching that level at what we're talking about right now. We've been higher than this. Our businesses in Tewksbury have been taxed at a higher shift in the past. So it's not like we're approaching unrecognized territory. It's also not increases of 2%. Last year, there was a decrease
Correct.
for the CIP
Right.
and the residential in the rate, even with the shift. So I think that balance is important and it's maintained, but we're going to see an increase this year because of the valuations. That's going to happen. Anyway, I think when we talk about, as selectmen, I think it's incumbent upon us to do the best that we can for our residents. And 83% of the valuation in this town is on residents. And if we're not talking about what's good for residents, what are we doing? Yes, we have to pay attention to what's good for businesses, and yes, there has to be a balance, and I'm speaking to those issues too. But it's 83% of this community is paid for by residents, and they're driving on these roads just like the tractor trailers are driving on these roads, tearing up our streets. They're using all of the resources in this community, just like businesses are, not at the same levels. But we have to, these people live here, they sleep here, they work somewhere else sometimes, and they come back here, they're raising their families here, and I think it's incumbent upon us to be cognizant of that at all times. And I'm not saying we're not. I agree with many of the points that everybody has made. But I think that this is the opportunity as selectmen to turn the dial a little bit and make small differences.
Well, I think we all said our piece. We don't need friendly fire between the board. Ms. Stronach?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was on the board in 2007 when we made that big shift. And again, as I started out by saying, I am a proponent of that. It was very different economic times, and the decisions that were made by the board at that time were what I would call catastrophic in some regards. And we had some very, very difficult decisions to make. And that was a huge, that really, that was one of the first big decisions that we had to make. And there was a reason for that, and we're not in those same economic times now. So I agree with you on that shift. So I just needed to say that because I'm aware that the history of that tax shift. So I appreciate that.
All right, very good. I think we all said our piece. Again, I think we all did what we're supposed to do. So now the big question is, I guess I'll entertain motions. Actually, I'm going to pause. Mr. Montori, any other further comments on your side, Mr. Montori?
No, all set, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Montori. So with that being said, what is the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to have the tax shift at the recommended value of 1.55 for the minimum residential factor.
Okay, I have a motion. I have a motion and I have a second. I'm going to pause. Any discussion?
The minimum residential factor would be, just for the record, 0.8916.
Sorry.
No,
That's fine.
I was going to, right, we're saying exactly. And that's based on the town manager's recommendation. The 1.55 equals the resident factor of 0.8916. Okay.
Thank you, I'm on
So
that.
100%.
Yep, so I have a motion and I have a second. So I'm going to, so all those in favor, please let's raise your hand for the audience. Sometimes we all jump in. So if you're in support of the motion, please raise your hand to support it. 2. Seeing none. If you're nay against the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, so I have 3-2 and that motion fails. So I will entertain, is there another motion on the table?
I'd like to make a motion to make it 1.56 of the thing to be in the middle of this, that we've had some conversation here, going from 1.57 to 1.55. I think that's a little middle ground to try to find some happy medium between the board and try to come up with something for the residents. And I think that would, I'd like to make that recommendation.
Okay. I have a motion to make the shift as a resident factor, again, to Ms. Wells and White, a 1.56 that equals to 0.0889. So I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, signify by saying yes. Opposed? No, the motion carries 4-1. Thank you guys very much. Ms. Foley, thank you very much. Great job per
Chair,
usual.
what was the count?
4-1, 4 yea, 1 nay.
Who was the nay?
That was me.
Oh, you wanted to go up higher.
I was in favor of the 157.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I thought we were all,
Okay.
I like the unanimous.
What's that, I'm sorry?
Never mind. I didn't see the hands.
Oh, yeah, and sometimes the residents say we all talk at once, and I get confused myself. So I think moving forward, it'd be like a yay and then a nay, or a roll call. I just know, hey, so I'm sorry, it was 4-1.
We can't see.
On the nose.
Okay, but we're all understanding, it was 4-1, we're good? The motion carries. Ms. Foley, thank you so much. Mr. Montori, thank you guys so much for pulling it
Thank you.
together.
I'm going to give you this to have each board member sign the back, and we'll upload that for.
Perfect. Awesome, thank you again.
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks again, awesome job, thank you. Okay, we'll start there. All right, I know a little bit of past, but we know sometimes the tax classification hearing does take some time. So at this point, I'd like to move to the schedule item 7:30. I know we're way past our time. For Powers and Sullivan, audit review. Anybody need a break, or you guys good?
No, we're good.
Okay, we'll keep rolling. Thank you, guys. And just name and position for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Romina Mamelli. I was the partner on site.
And I'm Richard Sullivan. I'm partner, concurring partner, I would say. And just as a recommend, I noticed that Romina was promoted to partner as effective July 1st. So it was a big moment for our firm.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we want to thank you very much for having us here tonight to go over the results of the FY19 Towns audits. We have 3 reports that you should have One is the financial statements, then we have a schedule of federal awards, and we have a management letter. So I thought maybe we could start off by just talking about what it is that we do. So in your reports, our objective is to give an opinion on these financial statements. It is management's responsibility to compile the information, to put it together, to verify that they are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And we make sure that they are indeed in compliance with both that and that everything is fairly and not materially misstated. So what we do is we come in, part of our process is we come in the spring, we were here in mid-May, and we do all of our testing that we can do for any items that do not require a year-end balance. We look at the town's budget, we look at transaction testing, we select a sample of revenue, expenditures, journal entries, payroll. We do OPEB census data testing. OPEB's the big thing. And then we look at long-term debt, and most of the time we do the majority of our single audit testing. So when we come back out in July, we're actually here July 29th, so outstanding for the staff here to be ready. That means they're reconciled, their books are closed, we come out, we get everything when we walk in the door. And in some instances, we had some of the stuff the week before.
The town of Tewksbury is one of the first audits our firm does.
What
Because the
day
books
did
get
you come?
closed. so
July
quickly.
29th,
It's 30 days?
and they're ready. So kudos to Pam and her staff, and Kelly and her staff, and everyone else that we get the information from. So when we come in at year end, we look at everything that is as of a balance of June 30th. So we make sure that there's proper cutoff procedures in place, that the balances that are there are true. We audit cash, we audit the receivables, we verify that there's been no adjustments at year end to make these balances tie in. So, and we found nothing. We came in, we had a very clean audit. We were provided with everything that we had requested, and it went very smooth. We were here for 2 weeks. We had a team of 4 people, plus Rich over here, doing a lot of the reviewing. And part of what we do is we do a lot of our analytics. We test internal controls to make sure that there's nothing that seems basically not proper, not correct. And we make sure that the financial statements are in accordance with GAAP. So in our financial statements, you should have 3 reports, the first one being the financial statements. We have an unqualified audit opinion. That is the best opinion you could have. In this whole report, the town owns all of it. We own just the audit opinion. So everything that's here was provided by the town. We've audited every number that's in here. And it was a nice, clean audit. So what makes this up is, like I said, our audit opinion. There's the MD&A, which is management's discussion and analysis. It's kind of the cheat sheet. If you really want to just kind of read it and get a good sense of what happened in town, you could read those 10 pages and get a very good idea of where the town is financially. Then we have the financial statements, followed by the notes to the financial statements, required supplementary information, and notes to the required supplementary information. So one of the big things with the town is the budget. So the budget is in the required supplementary information. We look at the budget. We verify that what's been voted is indeed what's in the town's ledgers, that any additional appropriations have been recorded, that the internal controls are in place to verify that there are no departments that are overspending their budget. And when we come in year end, we look at the final budget to verify encumbrances are proper, that the free cash, any free cash that's been certified, that has been voted to be used, is indeed in there and has been transferred to the proper account, to the proper channels, like stabilization, or in some instances this year you had a $600,000 appropriation from free cash for snow and ice deficits. So we verify that those are all correct and proper. So really good budget this year. You had a $1.2 million increase. Your revenue came in $3.2 million higher than what was budgeted, and your expenditures, you turned back $1.4 million. You did use $3.9 million of free cash, like I said, $600,000 for snow and ice, 2.6 million for the stabilization fund, and then 650,000 for school capital outlay improvements. So all in all, very good year, which has been consistent for the past few years with the town. So we like to see that. Your general fund, now we're going to move to your fund financial statements. So your general fund, your unassigned fund balance was 13.4 million, and that includes your stabilization and your special education reserve. So your stabilization had 3.6 million, your special education reserve had 750,000. And then that total was 16.9% of your general fund expenditures. That's a very healthy fund balance. Rating agencies look at this stuff, and that's a very, very healthy fund balance. For your major funds, I know you keep talking about the school. So you did have, the school was a major fund. The town had borrowed $60 million just prior to year end, so we included it. There were no expenditures. There was also the fire station construction, which we know was $15 million was issued in FY18, and so that was also classified. There's certain criteria that makes you classify it as a major fund. So those both hit that criteria. And then you have non-major, which consists of your special revenue funds, town revolving, school revolving, gifts and grants, community preservation, any construction projects that didn't meet the criteria, which is your town capital projects, and permanent funds like cemetery perpetual care. And that had an ending balance of 14.1 million, which was very good. For your enterprise funds, they all came in positive, which was partly interesting because of OPEB, net pension liability, and so forth. Cable doesn't have OPEB, but it does have the net pension liability. So the sewer got a little help because there's that $4.6 million subsidy that's included in there. But water came in with $1.1 million positive. Sewer had the 4.6 and came at $111,000. So all in all, good year for the enterprise funds. Your statement of net position, which is your full accrual financial statements, they have your net pension liability and your OPEB. So this is what a lot of people like to look at, see what's going on. This causes your unrestricted fund balance on your statement of net position to be a negative number, and most every community is in the same boat. So your net pension liability was $105 million. That was up a little bit, partly because Middlesex Retirement has a 12/31/18 year end, and November and December were really bad months in the market. And so you had a 2.4%
Negative.
decrease in your rate versus last year it was about 17% increase. So that causes that shift. Every year that number is going to change by those factors. And then in your OPEB fund, you had 71.2 million, which was a little bit higher than last year. You had a valuation as of 7/1/18 that was used for the town's 18 audit and the town's 19 audit. So the town will be getting a new valuation, and those numbers will change. There's different factors that go into it. Your discount rate was 7.5%. If the discount rate goes down or goes up, that would change it. Mortality tables change it, and there's other conditions like change in personnel, change in plans, and the what else is there?
Well, there's a discount rate, investment return, depending how and also the contributions made.
The contributions made.
By the town into the fund, which were $853,000 last year.
So your OPEB trust has $3.8 million. The town has done a really good job the last couple of years in funding this. You had $853,000 going last year and this year, fiscal 19, fiscal 18. And prior to that, you're moving in $350,000 a year. So that's 5% funded, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. What rating agencies are looking at is to verify that towns have a policy in place to fund, which you do, that you're actually funding, which you are, and you're making it important in your financial decisions to verify that this is an estimate, but it's going to be a real liability. So you're taking the proper channels to go in and fund that. Debt. So debt was the other big number on your statement of net position. So you had debt debt total of $188.2 million. The current year issuances, you had $54 million that you issued for the school. You had a nice premium of $5.6 million, which helps. And then you had $1.7 million in the water. And your percentage of governmental debt to total appropriation was 4.2%, which is very manageable. Anything under 5% is good. Are there any questions on the financial statements?
We'll probably have questions after, but we'll go through it if that's,
So I'm going to take over now, but one of the things I did want to leave you with, and she kind of mentioned it, is some of the things when we come in, you may have heard me say this before, but we kind of come in like the Marines. We want to get in and we want to get out. I'm pretty sure they feel the same way. But the idea is when we arrive, what kind of package, we call it an audit package, is available to us when we come in. And usually we have a pile of information waiting for us. And as a person in Romina's shoes who's responsible for dealing out, you've got 4 people in front of you, you've got to keep them busy. You can basically hand out all the different sections based on obviously the talent of the person that's with them. But to have the information there allows you to plan out the job so much better. And the other thing that I'd like to share is that some of the stuff we have to do repetitively.
just grab the mic.
Oh, sorry. Some of the stuff we have to do repetitively, meaning that we're going to audit cash, we're going to audit receivables, we're going to do certain things. But we also do some things a little differently every year. And the idea is to just keep people on their toes. And what I can share with you is that your people responded appropriately. They had a sense of urgency. They were as much wanted to get us the information as we were asking for it. So I just want to leave you with that impression that we're very happy that you folks have some good finance people doing good work for you. So I'm just going to jump into the last 2 reports. The first one is fairly straightforward. It's the federal awards report. You received more than $750,000 of federal awards. In fact, it was $2.1 million in FY19. Each year we have to test what is called a major grant, and there's certain criteria for determining that. Historically, and I don't think it's ever changed for several years, is we audit the special education called cluster, which is probably a series of 2 or 3 grants that fall under what the feds call a cluster. And we test it for compliance, we test it for what we call appropriate costs being charged to the grant. The filing of the federal reports, are they done timely? Are they done accurately? And the results of our report were, there were no findings, there were no question costs, all compliance requirements were met. So in what we have in that small report is three opinions. They're all unmodified opinions and what I call a clean opinion. So the people who are responsible for handling federal grants from our perspective are doing a good job programmatically. Now the management letter. I kind of had to dig back a little bit on this one because it's kind of light. And when we have a thin management letter, I say thin to win, because that means things are going well. Now, I also said, I don't want them to think we're mailing this in, because, you know, management letters, some people really focus on them. Well, I only went back 3 years to 17, and I came up with 10 points that we had brought to your attention, or management's attention, as part of these previous management letters. And if I could just list some of them. There was the implementation of GASB 68, 74, and 75. There was the request that you do a fraud risk analysis. There was the documentation of internal control of federal grants, which was required by uniform guidance when they changed it from a single audit to uniform guidance. We talked about fixed asset capitalization. We wanted to see better internal controls over the managing of performance bonds, better internal controls over the managing of your student activities. These are just some of the things that we brought to your attention that were basically attacked and fixed. So we've been paying attention. It's just that you have a management team, a financial management team, that seems to take these comments to heart and fixes them by the time we come back the next year. So we have one comment this year. This comment has been around a little bit, and it's been in the process of developing, but we kind of recommend it be maybe accelerated a little bit, and that's to develop a written disaster recovery policy. And the idea behind it is very simple. I know that there's probably people in this room, and they're probably outside this room, who know what should be done in the event that something occurs. But if that person is not here anymore, or is on vacation, or is somewhere else, you have to have somebody you can pick off the shelf and say, I know who I'm going to call for my tech. I know who I'm going to call for all the different things that an element of disaster entails. And our recommendation is that be formalized. So that's our one big comment for fiscal 19.
And we dig.
So Romina and I are here to take any questions you folks may have.
Outstanding. All right, let's open our board. How about Ms. Stronach? We'll start with Ms. Stronach.
That's great news.
It is good news. I agree.
I'd just like to thank Richard and his team, PM Kelly, Joanne, and all the people who do the work day to day, because that's really what gets it done, is those individuals who almost are invisible in doing that work and the stuff that goes into it. So I appreciate the audit, but I appreciate our staff more than,
As do we.
so I have no questions. Did somebody write that down for the record?
Oh, my God.
We're not done just yet. Hold that. Ms. Wellman.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is my first year on this board, and I have the privilege of working with folks who have great experience on this board. And it's my first time hearing the audit report. So I've read them for other venues and other things, but it's great to hear such good news. And your thorough report, I think, is also comforting, and I intend to tell many residents who watch this on YouTube when they have questions, like, go watch the audit report. That'll be great. So it was very thorough, and I appreciate that. And it speaks to the level of professionalism that we have in Tewksbury, especially when you said you're coming in on July 29 and ready to go. That's really impressive. I know what that looks like.
Very impressive.
Yeah. My only question was, what do other communities that look like ours, how do we compare to them, and in particularly in terms of funding our OPEB and our pension liabilities? What are the policies that we should be pursuing, if they're any different, or what would we want to consider tweaking as we look forward into future fiscal years?
Well, for one thing, it's great that you're actually funding. So in some communities, they don't have any type of funding plan. So the fact that the town of Tewksbury is actually being proactive and putting money aside into this trust fund is step number one. As far as, I know you do a few audits in this area, I want to say, at least with my experience with some of the audits that I have, I don't have many in this area, but 5% funded is very good. So you're on the right track, and every 2 years, that number is going to change. So you have to just kind of adapt with that. So whether it's policy changes, or sometimes you expect that number to come in a little higher, comes in a little lower, or vice versa. So work with your actuaries, verify the information, be realistic on your discount rates.
Just maybe to help out with you trying to grasp how you're doing, you made a lot of strides in a short period of time, relative to OPEB. I think it was difficult, probably not for this, maybe even for this board, but also for the residents to understand that this is a real, tangible liability. It's not something made up by the GASB.
Right.
You know, where other things are, quite frankly. This one is real, and you know, you've built into the budget a minimum funding standard, which I think is terrific. And then you've also taken extra where appropriate and put it into there. I think the fact that the recognition of this liability, and you know, I think it was
$3.8 million.
$3.8 million that you've gained in this very short period of time, is put you in not as a balance that's in the trust right now, because there are communities out there who have higher balances, but in this local area, I think you're up there with the best for this local area. I mean, we've got some clients that are kind of well-heeled, and you know, they got $35 million.
We're not Wellesley, so it's
Right,
not
that's
gonna
exactly
be-
right. That's what we're talking about.
I know. So we're not Wellesley, and I understand that, and I think the residents understand that. But at the same time, we do carry a lot of debt, and so being able to refinance that maybe someday with you know, a AAA bond rating is sort of what I'm getting at. Like,
Yeah.
what is it going to take to
You
get us
should
over
be
the edge?
AAA
Is that
right
even
now, in my
possible?
opinion. I think you
Well,
should be
can you
AAA
make
right
some phone calls?
I had the,
really wants
just
that.
as an aside, I was in a room with Richard one time when he was at S&B, and he knocked it out of the park, and I said, you guys should get it. And I think back then, this was a few years back, OPEB was just trickling in.
Yeah.
They didn't, I don't think that they probably said to themselves that, they probably said you had a plan, but where's the manifestation of that plan?
Sure.
I think there's something different this time around, to be
Yeah.
quite honest with you.
Well, I've read those old reports and from a few years ago, and so when the ratings agency. So that's sort of what I just want us to hear that and have it be top of mind as we work to support Richard and his staff as he goes forward with financial planning. And
Yep.
we
Yes.
take that long view, because the long view is going to save us a lot of money if we can get to that AAA
And if I could
rating.
just touch, just quickly,
Yeah.
I know $100 and so million of debt on the town itself sounds like a lot, but your budget, from a standpoint, is your debt service is only 4.2%.
Yeah.
That's very, to me, that's called manageable. So I get the number, you get the
Yep.
$100 million, but when I look at the outflow on a yearly basis, and this includes, the new debt, I think you're in a very manageable position.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective and that clarity, and it's so great for the.
Well, it also means that you're taking, I know I'm talking too much, but it also means you're taking care of your infrastructure assets and your vertical assets, because some communities let them go, and they have a 2% debt service, but all of a sudden they have to go out for $200 million to take care of everything at once. You put in a plan, the plan's taken place, you've got a CIP. So my thought process is that as you're looking at what you need to do and how you're gonna fund it, the laddering of debt, and again, managing at like 5% or below, give or take, but not too low, is a good way to approach the use of debt for keeping assets current.
Yep. I think that, thank you very much. Go
One
ahead.
other thing to keep in mind with OPEB, there's no funding requirement. Not like net pension liability, where you're required to make that payment every year
Sure.
to fund that.
Based on MGL.
Based on Mass General Law. But with OPEB, that's why there's such a difference in communities.
Yeah.
Because some communities, with no requirement, they're not putting anything aside, or they might have put a little seed money of $50,000 and have not put anything in
Right.
since then, thinking, okay, we have something. So the town being this
Yeah.
proactive is.
I just see that as a train
promising.
coming down. I don't think that's going to be that way forever and ever, amen. So I think that our approach and the town manager's approach has been excellent.
You're not kicking the can down the road.
No. Thank you.
Very good. How about Mr. Brian Dick?
Yeah, just following up on Mrs. Miller, I just remember sitting in the audience like 6-7 years ago, and Richard, $855,000 a year when you're talking about tax shift, all that stuff, projects. It's hard to stay on point and make that contribution each year. So I remember our town manager talking about that many years ago, and you sit there and go, geez, how are we going to do that? How are we going to fund that? And now where we are is pretty impressive. So hats off to Richard's team, in his style. I like what he's doing there. I think, when you come in, a third party, and you're talking about Tewksbury and, clean audit, the best, positive funding, very happy, good people, prepared, all that stuff is really not many questions I can ask. I think the disaster recovery recommendation is great. And then that's if our town manager left, right, that type of stuff, or there was a fire and records, all that stuff, right?
We had a disaster that we
Encompasses
needed to recover everything, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that that's a great recommendation, and if that's the only one, I think we're moving in the right spot. So thank you very much for your thoroughness. You guys always do a great job, and I'm very confident as a selectman having you guys do the audit. So I appreciate that. And I guess from an audit standpoint, what is the time frame? So you started when? I think I might have missed that.
July 29th.
29th, and it took you to
2 weeks.
2 weeks, and we're presenting now, and next year it starts the same time frame.
The report was issued a long time
It was
ago.
issued-
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, in
Because,
September.
Yeah, we had a really good turnaround, because in addition to getting the work done, then giving it to the client to basically review it, that was a good turnaround too.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sit on my desk too long.
I know Richard wanted you guys to have a good August before you came in. Fall is great, so thanks, Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the
I
presentation.
lied on the question. You actually did work in May as well, correct?
That's the prelim she was talking about with the
prelim, yep.
budget, the debt and all that
Yep.
stuff. Because if we waited, we'd never get anything done. So we do what I call not, things that aren't date sensitive to June 30th.
Very good. How about Mr. Mark Kratman?
I don't want to beat a dead dog, but it seems like we're all here just saying the same things, but we really can't minimize what the work that Richard and his team and everybody's done on this. This is how we able to refinance our bonds, get these cuts. We're just talking about the school and how much we thought we were going to be paying, $400 and something dollars, and now we're down to $300. That's what this is all about, doing this great work, covering us. I mean, good times don't come along that often. And when you have good times and you're able to fund things properly and things, I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we were talking about we weren't keeping up with what the library considered we should do, and small little things that were hurting us. And now we're finding a way to do that and pay the bills that need to be paid and having everything financed. So, I mean, I'm hoping we get that AAA. We've been working very hard to get there, and I think that will, you can't offset what you'll be able to save by refinancing. And when we refinanced our bonds, I think we were the biggest one. Richard, we financed earlier in the year to do that. We were the largest town.
Yeah, in the country. Yeah,
In the
largest
country,
offering.
at that time, to go out and get that rate. And he got out, grabbed it, and just happened to get it in there at the perfect time. And saved everybody $100 and something, which doesn't sound like a lot, but yeah, $100 each year out of somebody's pocket is a lot of money. And so I continue this good work. I just want to thank you for coming in and doing the audit, and Richard and everybody on your team. I think you have all done a wonderful job. I thank you so much. And I think we've got a great team in our town, so thank you.
Very good. Try to be short and sweet here. For our current rating now, Mr. Montori, I think is a double A plus.
Right.
Okay, and that was, I mean, outstanding news. What would be the process to go for a AAA? Is that something that, we can leverage this reporting if we're on the top X amount of percentile based on the audit? You would think we could take that and, maybe make it work for us.
Yeah, so they'll do a review of our bond rating during our next borrowing when we have one. They'll do an interim one sometimes. And right now, the OPEB is really the thing slowing us down. As great of an improvement as we made, they still would like to see better than that, which we'll be able to show over the next time we talk to them. So I think if we can convince them that we're on our way with OPEB, that's really the only thing holding us back.
Okay, and just for the residents, that's always a massive number. I mean, that could be north of $20, $30 million, and to your point, I don't know when we have to pay it off, 2024, 2035, you know what I mean, way up there. So that's typical of any community, right? I mean, it's the liability that we have to pay.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay, but we're, to your,
71 million.
71 million, and we have best practices and policies to put X amount, it's pennies on the dollars, but the bottom line is we're still putting funds there, so I get that. How about just a question as far as best practices around free cash, or like in a stabilization fund, for instance? Everything goes up, everything goes down. Do you ever say, can you guys ever kind of get a sense of which direction the wind's blowing as far as like based on an audit, or as totally independent of saying, hey, times are pretty good now. However, as we know, things go up and things go down. So do you look at the stabilization fund or surpluses in certain budgets to say, as a recommendation, we should be 10%. If we have a $100 million budget, we should have 10% of reserves. Is that part of the audit, or is that not part of the audit?
No, most times towns create their own policies on what they'd like to have in their reserves. And that way, at town meeting, you would vote then to make sure that you appropriate the proper balance in there. So that differs. We look at analytically what changes and why it changes, but we can't set the town's policies on how much should be in them. But we could offer some samples of things that we've seen and.
Okay, just a little bit of an example. the GFOA, which is a Governmental Financial Office Association, they basically don't want to, they recommend that you don't be lower than 5%, I'm sorry, you don't be lower than 5% of your total expenditures for fund balance. So you were at 16.9%, which is, I think you used the term healthy.
Yeah.
And that is healthy. The other thing that I wanted, you gave me the opportunity to talk about too, is that I really appreciate the way you use free cash. There are communities out there sometimes use free cash to take care of what I call structural elements of a budget, meaning that this is going to occur year after year after year. And the only thing I can convince myself, or the best way I can put it, is that I'm making a salary and I can't afford my mortgage, so I'm borrowing from my savings account every month to pay my mortgage. Eventually, the savings account goes away. So, you used free cash for school capital safety improvements. One-time money, one-time cost. You put it into the STAB fund, which we're accountants, we like reserves. It just works that way. And then you had snow and ice. And using it for snow and ice doesn't put a burden on the taxpayers because that's you can legally raise taxes to pay for snow and ice, and you decided not to. To me, that's good use of free cash. And I've seen it work this way over the past several years, and I appreciate that because it means that you're trying to do things that I think are the right way to do things. And especially when free cash comes about, because there are times when free cash comes about and every department wants a piece of it, and you have to be able to resist that urge.
And we do have a policy, just like the liabilities, to take X amount of free cash. I think we did at an special town meeting just a few months ago. We do have a policy to always take that free cash and vote that to put in a stabilization fund. So that is a part of our policy as well.
That's excellent.
Yeah, that's
I just didn't know what percentage, if there's a recommendation.
The bottom line recommendation is it should be lower than 5%, but all our AAAs are in this level or a little bit above.
Okay. All right, I think I say, we strive for perfection, yet no one's perfect, but our staff is pretty darn close when it comes to doing their job and their job function and their roles and responsibilities, so I thank you guys for that.
We think so.
Incredible work, that's awesome. And it starts from the top. He never gives himself credit, but this is where you gotta, credit where credit's due, so thank you guys so much. Okay, and now, really kind of no votes
I think
here,
that's it.
correct?
No, that was just a report.
Just a big old thank you. Thank you guys so much, and look forward to seeing you guys next year.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Anyone need a break?
Do you need a break, Mr. Chairman?
I am good. Let's go. Rock and roll. So this brings us to the scheduled item, the residents. Is there any public comments at this time? All right, seeing none. All right, let's jump into new.
We didn't do these other questions on
Oh, good, yeah, good catch. So let's backtrack. As part of our scheduled items, number one, our tax rate hearings. So it is the board's obligation to vote across the board. I think we jumped to, we have 4 particular votes that we're supposed to do, and I think we did. One of those votes was to,
allocate the local property tax.
yeah, so we did number 1. So we have 3 particular votes, and it's numbered, it's the purpose of this hearing on our thing. So why don't we jump in, is there a motion whether or not for a residential exception? This is number 2, whether or not to allow a residential exception.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a recommendation to vote no residential exemption for our 2020 purpose of this hearing.
I have a motion, second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All's in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. That's number 2. The next question that we need to take a vote on is whether it's not to allow a small commercial exemption.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a recommendation, a motion that we vote no on the small commercial exemption, the allowance of a smaller commercial exemption.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Vote carries. Last but not least, whether to allow the discount up to 25% for properties classified as open space.
Mr. Chairman, given the fact that we have no open classified space, I make a recommendation not to have that 25% property classification.
Very good. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Unanimous. All right, I think we're covered now, correct? All right, that was a little bit backwards. I apologize for that. So,
We got so carried away. Such a good presentation.
that's right. All right, let's bring us to new business. This is proposed, the Board of Selectmen meeting dates, and for the residents, we have outlined the meeting dates in which the Selectmen plan to meet for in 2000, essentially 2020. And again, these dates are always subject to change. I think we did a pretty good job this year. I think we only changed whatever it was, very, very few. So do I have a motion? Any questions on the dates for 2020?
Yeah, just one. There's a Scrivener's error. There's a July 14th and a July 15th meeting date, and it's I guess, just the 15th. The 14th is not supposed to be there.
Okay.
So it's one meeting in July, one meeting in August.
Okay, so I think what we can do is, well, let's make, do you have any dates? Can we just see if the 14th or 15th is, what particular day that's on, the 14th or the 15th? I think we want
Actually,
to.
you know what, the 14th is a Tuesday, the 15th is a Wednesday, so I had it wrong. It should be the 14th.
You got it wrong.
Yes.
I asked you.
I know, it should be the 14th.
Which
All right.
makes me ask the question, there has been some discussion over time about maybe doing a Wednesday meeting. Is there any interest in changing the date among the board?
No, I'm going to say not at this time. I like to be fair to all the other boards. I always say if we get we had a unanimous decision across the other boards, to be respectful of the other boards, because we're all equal, that we would look to change the dates to Wednesday. But we did socialize that, and it was a conflict with a few folks on the other particular boards. However, like I said, we can always just discuss as a board and change that if we want to, but sometimes there's a conflict for like taping and securing rooms. So now I will say, we also talked about typically our meetings are at 7 o'clock kickoff start. I do believe that we could probably explore the option to move a little bit earlier if we choose to. But do we have to make that decision now, Mr. Montori?
You can make it anytime you want.
Okay. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does,
Okay,
yes.
okay, cool.
Thank you.
I am just looking at February 18th. I don't know if that is
School.
school vacation, but I believe it is. So I would like to check on that date. I don't know if it matters to anyone on this board. I'm certainly open to it, but in terms of,
Sure.
just throw that out there.
All right, Mr. Cratton's going to look that up
Yeah, I
quickly.
think that is April, February vacation.
I know it's pretty close if it
Pretty
is.
sure, yeah, you know for sure it is. I'm six of one, half a dozen another.
Well, my thought process is, why don't we we could look to make an amendment, at least, let's get rid of the 15th, obviously, we're gonna go with July 14th, obviously. And like I said, if we need to modify any of the dates, we can always do that, subject to change.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to recommend that we start the meeting at 6:30
Just,
instead of 7 o'clock.
Just for the record, I work till 7 o'clock on Tuesdays.
Oh, okay, then I'm gonna.
So I always leave early to come to the meeting.
Remove that recommendation and leave it at 7 PM.
Okay. Like we said, we tried as a board, but I think we need to be fair to the other boards.
Occasionally, there's, a need for an earlier meeting, and I can make that happen, as needed. Like if there's a complication
I
or a
did not
Bruins
realize
playoff
that.
game, whatever it is, I can be here earlier from time to time.
Okay.
Just-
Newly, what's this point, newly newly noted.
Just for the board's knowledge, that is school vacation week
Yep.
for that week.
I thought so.
What's the week what's the week prior, Mr. Kratman?
The 11th and the 25th.
Yeah.
And what about April?
Oh, we don't know.
21st?
And just talking out loud here before we make a vote here, February 4th is our regular scheduled meeting on a Tuesday. I think pushing it to the 11th is quick. Maybe we can make amendment, just a recommendation for February 25th. That way we meet twice in February.
I like that.
Good idea.
Can what kind of a schedule do we have in February? Is there, that's a budget, I know that we're getting ready for budget, but
Well, the budget will be presented
March
well
day.
before that, yeah. We'll work around it, yeah.
I'm going to suggest that we maybe go down to potentially one meeting in February on the 11th, and then, if need be, add a meeting. Just because your crew is getting ready and, because it's March, right? that,
Yeah, I mean, we'll have the budget done, and we'll be presenting rates sometime in February, early March, but we'll work with anything.
Do we have that in the form of a motion? Like I said, we can be, okay.
form of a motion
So is,
to-
okay.
to collapse February to a February 11th meeting.
Okay, how about a February 11th meeting? How about, and just, also just to add in, we'll remove July 15th meeting.
And to remove July 15th.
Second.
A motion second, any discussion?
No,
It's 14th.
no, they said
14th.
remove the 15th,
Yeah,
have
remove
it
the
on the
15th.
14th.
Yep.
That's,
Yeah.
I said remove, right?
Yep.
You did. I'm telling him.
Trying to get,
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you guys for that. All right,
And Mr. Chairman, the April vacation is also school
I
vacation
thought
as
that
well.
as
That's April 21st. That's also,
However,
I'm going to make a recommendation that we take that one offline, easy enough, we can make the change accordingly between us, and we can bring it for next
I think
meeting.
April's, there's a lot of things going on in April. I don't think it's as significant as the winter vacation.
Well, as long as the reorganization meeting is a business meeting, because that's the only meeting before town meeting.
Right, that's why I'm saying I think we should leave it.
All right, we're going to leave it, like I said, we can always adjust it, we can always adjust it accordingly.
Sure, yeah.
All right, very good. This next new business is the discussion of Act H 3979, Awareness of Sewer Pollution in Public Waters. This one here, we're going to kind of postpone, and I think the next steps would, I think, Mr. Montour, we said Representative Robertson is going to come in. He's kind of intimate with whatever this is. He's going to come in, give us a presentation or a speech about this at a later date. Is that,
yes, he said he'd come into the next meeting if the board would like.
okay?
Can I just speak on
Ms.
this
Wellman?
one particular issue?
Sure.
Just for a minute, because I have a particular interest in this.
Sure.
This is, I'm not sure that this particular piece of legislation is exactly where we want to go with it, but I think it's very important for us to be cognizant of combined sewer outflows as people, as a community that draws water off the Merrimack. And I actually brought a study this evening that shows a correlation between combined sewer outflows and outbreaks of gastrointestinal illnesses. And the issue is about public notification from upstream communities to downstream communities when these things happen, because they're older mill towns like Lowell, Manchester, New Hampshire, Lawrence, and they have older systems that when they have stormwater, it flows raw sewage into the Merrimack River. And so the real issue is about getting public notification out. We have an excellent water treatment plant. Our water system is very safe in Tewksbury. And I got to tour it actually on Friday, thank you very much. And I don't want to make residents concerned about their water supply, but as a community that draws water from the Merrimack, I think that we should be vocal and active, and not just at our legislative delegation, but that this board should be speaking loudly along with our other town boards on combined sewer outflows and working with communities in New Hampshire. And upstream communities like Manchester drop a lot of the stuff into the water, and it's beyond their control, and it's a problem that's very, very expensive to fix. And there are maybe 100 some odd communities in the country where this is an issue, but a number of them are in this area because of our heritage and the Industrial Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's something that we should be particularly cognizant of, to work with our partners and with other communities to get the notifications out to water treatment plants and the public. So that's what this is something about. And it comes up at NIMCOG, which is why I'm somewhat interested in it.
Okay, perfect.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, that sounds about, Ms. Stronach?
Yeah, I can.
I was just going to ask if she could send that to all of us, provide that.
I can send you a summary, and Mr. Robertson would be great to have
Yeah.
come in to talk about stuff.
Yep, we're going to get Mr. Robertson to come in. He can bring in whoever he wants. Seems like you're going to be we all did some homework on it, but I don't know if there's going to be a potential, I have a lot of questions based on everything I read. So the plan would be bring Mr. Robinson in and experts on committees or committees being formed, the subcommittees, and then we'll digest all the information and see what, if we have to vote, or what action we can take, or we do go through NIMCOG. So does that sound reasonable to the board?
Very.
All right, very good. Next order of business, Mr. Steve Powers, disclosure by the municipal employee for snow plowing. I like to make this one short and sweet. We get this request every year from Mr. Steve Powers. So do we have a motion?
Make the motion to approve Steve Powers' for snow plowing contract for the town of Tewksbury.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. All those in favor? Aye, unanimous. We love Steve Powers. All right, number 6 is the change in officer of, the change of officer and change in beneficiary interest application for an annual restaurant, all alcohol of beverages licenses of 99 restaurants of Boston LLC, 99 West LLC DBA, a 99 restaurant pub. So, Mr. Montori, if my understanding this is right, this is kind of a formality in the fact that they're changing ownership at the very, very tippity top level, and the ABC has approved it. Now, basically, it's hit all the paperwork's in line. This is almost like a formality on our side just to approve it.
Correct.
And I read through the 100 pages of documents. Everything seems to be in line. So any questions from the board?
I have none.
See, no, what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to approve the change of office as presented for doing business as a 99 restaurant and pub.
Second.
I wanted you to read the whole thing like I did. I'm just joking. All right, I have a motion to approve as stated in a new business, and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. You know I was just,
99 restaurant of Boston LLC.
I was just joking.
That's
I was
good.
joking. All right, our next order of business is the
I'm sure if that was the name.
It was long-winded, that's all. The next order of business is the easement agreement, PSI Atlantic Tewksbury, Mass. LLC, 395 Woburn Street. And Mr. Montori, again, this might be a formality, but maybe give the board a quick high-level overview.
At town meeting in October, the town meeting approved an article authorizing the board to accept this easement from what is CubeSmart on Woburn Street. The easement will allow the town to install drainage in that area for drainage that comes off of Woburn Street. Senior town council has reviewed the easement agreement. Everything is in order, and I would recommend the board approve it.
Thank you, Mr. Montori. Any questions from the board? What is the pleasure of the board?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the easement agreement presented tonight by the town manager, his recommendation for PSI Atlantic Tewksbury, Mass. LLC, 395 Woburn Street.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Stronach. All those in favor? Aye. Carries unanimous. All right, Mr. Montori, it brings us to the town manager section.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of items. I'd ask the board to approve senior town council's invoice for the month of September in the amount of $7,712.
So moved.
So, second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
And I'd ask the board to approve town council's invoice for September 16th through September 30th in the amount of $3,060.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous.
And then finally, I'd ask the board to approve town council's invoice for October 1st through October 15th in the amount of $3,485.
So moved.
I have a motion
Second.
and I have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
That's
Thank
it.
you very much,
That's
Mr. Montori. It brings us the meeting minutes. We actually have two. We have June 19, 2019, regular meetings, and we have July 16th, 2019.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we approve the board meeting minutes of July 19, 2019.
A motion?
I'll second that.
Motion and second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
And I make a motion that the board approve the July 16, 2019 regular session minutes.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you, Ms. Wellman. That brings us to board member reports. How about we start with Mr. Kratman?
Okay, let me see, let me bring them up. Economic Development, the last time we met was on September 30th. We had a robust discussion about updating our website and doing a bunch of things out there and trying to get some businesses to come into Tewksbury. You're doing pretty well. LRTA meeting, we had one on October 24th. We'll have one the end of this month as well. Zoning Bylaw Committee, we met on October 30th, 2019, and we had a joint session with the planning board to discuss some of the zoning bylaw changes and some discussions, and we'll continue to do so and moving forward. And pretty much that's all I have for board meetings at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kratman. Ms. Stronach?
How are you tonight? I am so happy to be here. And we have December tree lighting, December 6th. So the events committee will be meeting tomorrow night at 6 PM. I'm sorry, November 6th at 7 PM here to work on that tree lighting. Oh, we would love some volunteers if anybody wants to come down. Elementary Building Committee will be meeting on November 14th. I do want to mention, Mr. Chairman, that at the last Elementary Building Committee, which I was unable to attend, but school committee member Jamie Cutlass, who's the assistant chair, sat in for me, and at that meeting, we discussed reconciling the budget. And what that really entails is looking at the difference between what we have put forth through the MSBA and what the contractor believes that the cost is actually going to come in. Although that number seems it was a little under $2 million, and that seems like a very high number, and oh my goodness, we're over budget already, we haven't even done any work. That is very normal in this process of reconciliation, and am I right, Mr.?
Correct.
So this is not something that we don't normally do. Right now, we still have about $400,000. We believe that that will easily be absorbed through the design process of this. So I do want residents to know that this project is not over budget, and we have a project funding agreement with the MSBA, and we are not allowed to go over that number. So that number that we provided to the public, we made an agreement with the MSBA, and that is our bottom line budget. So everything will have to be cut from there if there is a need for that. But I just want to, this is kind of normal course for business, and I want people to know that that's happening. The other thing that I want to talk about tonight is the budget message. So we had a lot of budget talk tonight at this meeting, and this week our town manager issued his budget message, and similar to his humble fashion, he did not want to talk about that, but what he told the department heads is that he's very concerned with the future of the economy, which is things that you were bringing up, and the commitment to the FY21 budget is going to be for the schools and the DPW improvements being funded by the operating budget. So I think that's really important. He is put the accountability on the department heads to ensure that the salary increases are in line with the contracts, which is great. And then he level funded all the other priorities that they have in terms of their operation. And then is going to be having them present 3 priorities, which they'll be reporting to us on. So I kind of just want everyone to know that the reason we are able to have the discussions that we had tonight is because, never mind that our audits are in on July 4th, it is November, and the budget message is out to our department heads. So thank you for that. And that's all I have.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Brian Dick?
Yeah, nothing to add, Mr.
You,
Chief.
perfect.
I
Mr.
just
Brian
want
Dick?
to say thank you to everyone for Veterans Day. Sorry.
Nothing to add, Mr. Chair, something to pass to Mrs. Wallin.
Thanks. 2 quick things. The beautification committee met last week. We talked about a NIP take-back effort. We talked about an anti-litter effort. Most important among these efforts is that they're not bans. They are working with our residents on and businesses on awareness campaigns, things like that. But in the public and so forth, but not bans on new things. And we also do these beautification awards. I don't know if you are aware of this, but we pick 2 businesses each month that we recognize for how great their landscape is. And it is recognition of maybe a great, like, just tremendous property, but also if it's a small business, if they're doing something with what they have. So the two businesses in September were Tewksbury Country Club and Saffron, which is a little restaurant across the street, and they do a great job to beautify their business in a very small space. So they were delighted. They were really, really excited. So they get a letter from the certificate from the beautification committee, and it's great. And it's positive, and it promotes local businesses. So it's a great effort, recognizing people for doing great stuff. And I also wanted to add that on Friday, Mr. Motori and Mr. Sadwick were very gracious to babysit me on a tour all over town. And I got to look at all of the municipal buildings, with the exception of Town Hall and the Annex, because I do visit those from time to time, here and there. But it was really, really great to get into all of the buildings, talk to staff. I'm very grateful people took so much time out of their day, particularly the town manager and the assistant town manager, to do that. I've been in most of these buildings before, but to be able to talk to firefighters about their apparatus and DPW employees about, their facilities that they have there, and to look at our water department, and that operation is just unbelievable. To see the space where we arm our police officers, all of that stuff was just really a wonderful thing to be able to do, and a privilege. So I thank you again for that experience. And Mr. Kelly joined me on some of that day, and it was really good to be able to get there with a colleague and do those things. So thank you.
Perfect. All right, just a few things here. So we've got a lot of questions about Route 38 recently, and I do think kind of we hit a home run for the upper part of 38 here, getting that, it's in the process of being milled now, and I've got comments where it's, even the milling is better than the road. Can we do the whole 38, just mill all of 38? But on a serious note, there was a town that didn't have budget, and Mr. Kratman did a lot of heavy lifting. The town did a lot of heavy lifting. Our engineers did a lot of heavy lifting, and Montori, per usual, to kind of really race to the winter. It's going to get chilly very quick here. I think snow is coming in the future. That's a dirty word, but the point is, we're paving that now. Hopefully, we'll get it done in the very near future. And then we have Salem Road in the corner of Salem and South in the spring. We have 133 going off, I believe, in the spring, and the bulk of 38 should get completed in 2022, part of NIMCOG that we've had on paper for 5 years. The point is, we're going to start to see progress, and we've got a lot of work done with our water, so when we do pave it, we're not ripping that up. So that's a huge undertaking, just because it's the Commonwealth, they own the road, but I always say we own the road, but that's huge to residents, so I wanted to just call that out. Last but not least, on Friday, I believe it's the 8th, we're going to have let's end on a real positive note, a Veterans Day breakfast at the Senior Center, starting at 11 o'clock, and we typically serve. I love that. Looking forward to that. And last but not least, we have our Veterans Day ceremony on Monday, November 11th at 11 o'clock, right here. It's going to be chilly, so bundle up, but that always kind of like beautiful ceremony, and always kind of make the hair on your back and neck stand up for our veterans and their families. So really looking forward to that. So that's all I have. But now what we're going to do is transition into executive session. So I always have to give a purpose why without compromising the purpose. So I would ask if the board moves into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to contract negotiations and not return into open session. I look to form that in the form of a motion, and because of the executive session, I have to call a roll call. So I'd like to call a roll part at this point with that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
Moved. I'm going to look for a roll call vote to move in a second. So Ms. Wellman?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so it's confirmed. So we're going to move into the executive session. At this point, we're going to sign off to the public session, and we're going to enter into executive session. So there's no more camera. Thank you guys very much tonight. Thank you.